Okay, just a quick disclaimer for everyone that's popping on. We are recording the meeting for training purposes and to send it to some of our realtor partners if they happen to want the video afterwards. And we will get started at since it's 1:30 here. Melissa will let people in as they come in here, but we're going to go ahead and get right into our rate outlook for 2023. First off, I want to thank everyone for taking the time today. As always, we're going to be 30 minutes or less. We want to be really respectful of your time, but we want to give you some information that could be valuable and help you as clients are asking you some of these questions when you're out in the wild. So we'll go ahead and get right to the program right after I do some quick introductions here. So I just want to let you know who's all on the call with us today. So myself, Larry Johnson, I'll be one of the presenters here. We have Heidi Thompson. We have a couple of Heidi's team members will be on as well. And then we also have Robert and Drew, who service our Rochester and Twin Cities and metro areas. We have Aaron and Shelby, who take care of their respective areas, and Marshall, Tracy, Slayton, and Lake Wilson for Aaron. Shelby is in charge of Montevideo, St. Cloud, Summit, Florence, Wilmot, Big Stone, City, and amongst others up in that area. Brianna Erdman is on board with us, as well as Melissa Olson. Brianna takes care of Redwood Falls, Gibbon, Danube, Bellevue, up by our headquarters, and then Melissa's in charge of the southeast section of the state here with Albert Lee, Waseca, Rochester, helps us out with mortgages in that area. So thank your lenders for inviting you if they invited you over to this, and let's get right into it here. So there's three types of rates that we watch as lenders, and we want to pay attention to these because it kind of plays into where mortgage rates are heading, and it gives us some insight into what might be happening in the market. First thing that we look at is that 30-year coupon. Now that is a 30-year treasury based on the 5.5% mortgage bond. We watch that one. The 10-year U.S. Treasury. Now we watch these two bonds in conjunction with one another. Now, when we know data from both of these, we can determine a little bit about what's happening with rates and how they're going to be moving forward. So it's pretty helpful to know how to utilize those. For example, the 30-year is what the loan companies base their pricing structure on. It's how they determine rates. And the 10-year is really closely tied to the 30. And I'll explain a little more detail. I've got a couple slides later on that will talk about this relationship. And then we also watch the Fed funds rate. Now, this is the overnight rate or short-term money rate, if you will. So when Jerome Powell, the Fed chairman, comes onto TV and he says, hey, we're going to raise the rates, we can see this is overnight lending. So think car loans, credit cards, short-term loans, things like that are really impacted by this rate increase. And it's not uncommon to see a rate increase from the Fed and a decrease in mortgage rates even in the same day because they're not tied together. They do have some relationship, but it isn't a direct correlation to mortgage rates. And we'll explain a little bit about that. There's other factors that go into the mortgage rates there. So what is the outlook for 2023 and what's going to impact rates? Well, we know that for good or for bad, interest rates are really going to be driving the market. And we saw how it drove the market negatively last year because we saw rates go sky high, and we saw it impact everyone's business on this call. You know, we saw applications down, we saw less people entering the market. So, you know, for good or bad, interest rates are going to drive things. Now, the first metric that we really like to look at here is, you know, where is year-over-year inflation and why is that important? Well, last year, inflation was really, really high. So it wasn't uncommon to see a few months with 7% increases, 6%, 8%. But now as we're coming back around this year, at the beginning of 2023, we're going to see lower year-over-year interest rates. For example, this month might be 2% versus 6% last year. We're going to see a reduction in that. That's pretty important for rates moving forward. We know that supply is going to continue to be an issue. You know, for our realtor partners that are on board here, you know that you know we're still seeing limited inventory hit in the market. We're hoping that some of that's starting to break as spring comes around, but supply could continue to be an issue. And we have some consumer price index data. So according to the CPI, prices have come down across the board, believe it or not. It might not feel that way. Eggs are still over $6 a dozen, but overall prices are depressing for gas, food, and other items. And then shelter costs play a big factor into that CPI index. So about 39% of the core CPI data shows that, well, we're seeing that house prices are showing an increase in the media, but they're actually decreasing. I don't want to get too technical, but I'm going to give you a quick analogy on a roller coaster. There's something that's called the lag effect that kind of impacts this CPI data. And this is why a lot of the news outlets are saying, oh, we're going to have a housing crash. Well, because they're misreading the data. So what happens, imagine you're on a roller coaster, you get to the hump, and the front end of the roller coaster starts coming down. Well, the front end of the coaster is going faster than the back end, correct? So what we've got there is a little bit of the lag effect. And because it takes such a long time for the housing to catch up, we've seen the other metrics starting to decrease. The housing metric is going to decrease as well. It just takes it a while to catch up. So that's something that's kind of positive in our data here. Now, let's go over some quick facts about the 30-year and the 10-year. I kind of told you that those two are tied together. We're going to go ahead and review real quick why they're tied together. So, for example, over the last 35 years, a normal spread between a 10-year bond and a 30-year bond has been about 2%. Why is that important? It's, well, we watch it because they stay that level pretty consistently. Not always a one-to-one correlation when we check in. Like we could look today and they could be off a little bit, but when we look at the long term, it's been averaging about 2%. Last year, we saw about a 3% differential between the 10-year and the 30-year, and that was something that helped creep rates up. It wasn't ideal for us. And it really impacted our market here. So now as the 10-year drops, it's expected that that normal spread is going to come back into play. So this is something that mortgage lenders have been watching pretty closely. So what happened last quarter of the year, we started to see things come back into play. They're going to rebound back to normal. And again, these bonds are really tied together. That's one of the points that we want to get across, and it's one of the metrics that we really watch. So where are our buyers? Well, buyers are hibernating a little bit, and we believe that they're hibernating due to some perceived affordability issues. So I want to go over some of the factors that we believe are kind of hindering our buyers from entering the market. So something that we're seeing here is housing supply is a little bit softer. We have annual new household formations are still around 1.3 million, and those are in our hibernation. Now, what are household formations? So kids leaving college or mom and dad's home and entering the home buying arena. It's also families that have outgrown their current residence. So anyone in that scenario that's really going to be looking for a house. It's estimated nationwide it's going to be about 1.3 million this year. We have a total new supply as of the December data of about 1.4 million houses that were going to be available nationwide. Now, when you add the new house formations to the regular chunk of buyers that already hit the market, we're at about 1.7. So you can see this is where we're saying we might still have a little bit of a supply issue, as we might end up having more buyers coming into the market than we have homes available. There's some other things that might impact them, and it could be affordability, and we'll talk about that in the next slide a little bit. But for example, in 2021, if we had a buyer looking at a $400,000 house, as you can see on the slide here, rates were sitting around 3.5%. That was a principal and interest payment of about $1,796. Household incomes, according to ADP, around 9,000 was the average. Okay, so at this level right here, that's about a 20% household ratio. That's pretty affordable for a family. Well, then last year, that same house, due to appreciation, was about 440,000. 6.25 was about the average rate at that time. We know that it got close to 7 and over 7 in some cases. Well, That principal and interest payment now is 2709 on a household income of 98. We still had a 9% increase in wages, but everything else went up, making it feel really unaffordable. So now at this level here, that's at about 28% of their household ratio. A lot more of their money is going to other expenses, making them feel that maybe they couldn't necessarily afford a house. Now, if we look at it this year, let's just say that appreciation's at a minimum 1 to 3%, but we're still going to use that 440 value. If we get those rates down to around 5%, that's 2362. They're still going to have a little bump in income according to ADP's data. We just didn't have some hard numbers to put in there yet, but there are some things that could still impact affordability, and let's talk about it on the next slide here. So we believe as a group that the recession is, we're more than likely in that recession, even though it hasn't been reported. But a recession is good for mortgage rates, and I'm going to explain why. So the last 7 recessions, excluding 08 and 09, have actually resulted in lower mortgage rates. Now, the reason 08 and 09 was the exception was because that was a recession caused by the housing market. But if we exclude that one and we look at the historical data, rates always dip and have dipped in the last 7 cycles. So some factors that come into play for your clients this year is going to be a reduction of savings and increased overall debt coming out of 2022. So if we look at these charts, we can see we had a real big dip in credit card debt. We had some pretty good savings rates. And then what happened was the stimulus checks and the payments from the government stopped. And costs started to increase, and nobody stopped or adjusted their living styles. We're still seeing folks that are living the same lifestyle, but they're dipping into their savings a lot more to do it, and they're using a lot of revolving debt in order to maintain that lifestyle. So something we've got to be aware of is that we might have some buyers coming in with reduced savings for down payment and increased debts. So we want to make sure we're qualifying them or advising them properly. Hey, make sure we're not adding things to that card. Make sure you're putting enough money away. Now, these are national averages, and around here, a lot of folks seem to do pretty good with their spending. They're pretty frugal, but it's just something to keep an eye out. But it could help ease the pain as some buyers might not qualify, and it might not place any extra strain on the reduced amount of inventory. But it's just some interesting data that we thought we'd share with you. So where are we at? What's our housing forecast in a nutshell? Well, let's take a look at 2023. We think that home value appreciation is expected to be in the low single digits, and activity is gonna, we're expecting an increase in overall activity this year versus last year. A couple factors that really play into that are the lower inflation, the recession-like slowdown. Folks' incomes are still increasing, which is going to help that affordability factor. We still think we're going to be in a tight inventory environment, and rents are still relatively expensive and continue to rise, which plays into our favor as people really want to get out of that rental situation and start buying. So our mortgage rate forecast, well, we got a couple of challenges, and one is global quantitative tightening. Now, you might have heard over the weekend, the European markets were talking about how we need to continue to increase rates, but that's nothing to get too upset about. It did impact mortgage-backed securities over the weekend, but America is really the leader in this, and we haven't adjusted our forecast because we still feel that the data supports what we're showing. And there's a lack of central buying. We're not seeing the government buy any mortgage-backed securities or doing any more quantitative easing, so that's something that's a challenge. But things that are, again, in our favor, we've got lower inflation. We're going to have some retail inventory starting to hit the market. We're going to see an increase in servicing value, which is really a bank thing, but it gets more banks interested and back into lending and incentives. And rates generally decline during the recession. So what we're really looking at next year is we're looking for the 30-year rate to move to 5% during the first half of 2023, supported by the historical data. And the US 10-year will be near 3% or lower. So with that going to 3 and it being tied to that 2% tether, we're really anticipating that we can be to the mid 5s to the low 5s by about the middle part of the year. So as clients come to you or they start asking about where they should be, or they might have hesitation or apprehension about buying this year, just remind them that we do feel pretty strongly that rates are gonna start dipping, because that's what the data shows. Now, if I had a crystal ball and knew this for sure, I'd be in a fancy office in New York. I wouldn't be here. But for all intents and purposes, this is what the data is showing us. This is what it's really shaking out to. So that's kind of our prediction on where it's going, and the hard data to show why we feel that way. So now we do want to open it up for a question and answer. Again, want to be respectful of your time. If you have any questions on any of this, or questions about the data in general, now's a good time to ask, and you can just kind of chime in at any point here. Okay. And if there aren't any questions, we can ask for some general input as well. Again, we do these realtor jams about once a month. We want to make sure that the content is useful for you, educational, and worthy of your time. So if there's something you'd really like to see us cover, or something that you think might be a real benefit to your industry, just let us know. Again, I'll touch base on the volatility in the past couple of days, because rates did increase Monday and Tuesday. Now, the European banks have been talking really tough, and again, we believe that they're misreading the data. They continue to talk about the need for rate increases, and they're really ignoring the data that shows that the Fed's inflationary measures are already kicking in, which is evidenced by the pattern decline over the last couple of months. Now, a lot of the data that you've seen here today, we've compiled from Barry Habib from MBS Highway. If you haven't heard of Barry, I suggest you look him up on Instagram or LinkedIn. One of the titans in our industry, and whatever Barry says generally happens. A guy should really be running the Fed. And we also got a lot of this data from Lawrence Yun. He's the chief economist for the National Association of Realtors. So some of you realtors might recognize that name, as if you get any communications from that association, it's usually Lawrence's information that's coming your way. And he's him and Barry are very much aligned together. And then we also picked up some of the data, some of the numbers from a company called Arizent Research, which does a lot of mortgage and real estate kind of research there. So but with that being said, if there's any other questions, now's the time. Feel free, or if there's any other discussion that any of you want to have while we've got you on board. Or just mortgage questions in general, anything in general. All right. Well, without any questions, we'll let you get off early. Like I said, we always want to keep these short and sweet, and we hope that information was useful to you. We really do anticipate that this is where things are going to go, barring any unforeseen incidents like an outbreak of an expansion of war in Ukraine, or another COVID outbreak, anything that we can't account for. But if things stay as they have been, we are seeing rates in that declining level, and we have a pretty positive outlook for the middle portion of the year. So I want to thank you all for coming in. Thank the realtor or the mortgage lender that invited you, and we'll send you an invite for the next one. Again, if there's any content that you want to see, or any topics you want to see us cover, shoot me an email, or one of the other lenders on the communication here. We'd be more than happy to go over some topics and help get some information out that could be helpful to you. Thanks, and have a great day, guys.
Thanks, Larry. It's good information.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Larry.